Well, I'm very glad that we're at the end of our consultation process for our next generation paper, which we're publishing now. And I think it was hugely useful to go out and bring people from different backgrounds, people from telecoms companies, computer companies, broadcasting users and officials, because I think everyone has a different perspective. When you hear each other's perspective, you actually get a better appreciation of what is possible and what we can do to develop our next generation of broadband services. What we've done when doing is videoed the actual event, and what you'll be able to see on our YouTube link is some of the material from that event, some of the discussions, some of the flavour of it, and I think that gives people some sort of sense. We've also published a paper, and crucially we're getting down to action. I mean, the key thing now is to start delivering in terms of better broadband access to schools, getting access to state ducting, covering the areas of the country that previously weren't covered, having regulations how you get broadband access automatically into new housing developments. So those sort of developments are happening. We need to pursue them. We need companies in the area to be able to invest in these difficult economic times. And I think what we're doing in terms of the policy framework will help that. So I hope people enjoy watching the video of the event. I look forward to working with everyone who took part to keep delivering faster and cheaper and more effective broadband for the whole country. And that's set out in our policy paper. Thank you.
I suppose start the first discussion with a few very general comments. I'm going to keep my words to 4 minutes if I can. What broadband do we use? I think that might be slightly more useful as a question. What broadband do we need? And I think actually this is the area where our economic future will be determined. This network we're going to build is our sales system, is our sales network to the wider world, and is the guarantor, I believe, of our economy, where we have a real opportunity to deliver an economy for Ireland as an island which has for the last 50 years taken a course of openness, of being willing to trade in the world, of confidence around our skills in marketing, in banking, in finance, in telling stories. It is the crucial piece of infrastructure to help us achieve that economy. I'm absolutely confident that we as a people are perfectly placed globally to be one of the world leaders in how we adapt to using this new technology, this new network. And I do so because I have a certain sense that our characteristics fit in well with the nature of the network. It's an open network. It's one which is openly democratic. We are a democratic, flexible country. And it's one that will benefit those countries that can be flexible and that can collaborate, which is the nature of how such networks work best. And today's exercise, if maybe it's what it is be the change you want to be. We were deliberately going online and using some of the social network techniques, deliberately using a forum here where, as I said, it's open source policy making, where it's open to ideas and concepts and innovative suggestions. So that collaboration, I think we can do well as a country. That collaboration, I believe, is the one that will deliver for people looking to invest in networks as part of this infrastructure. Because I believe it is through collaboration that we can take advantage of it and become one of the best in the world in flexible use of such networks that makes an economic return from those who have to invest. And our concern as policymakers is to try to make sure that there is that economic investment return. It will be right for the wiser heads maybe who know what some of the investment decisions that are around that to say, well, hold on a sec here, that has to make economic sense for us to be able to do it. And I think actually collaboration between different network providers, between different industries that have an interest in this subject is what will deliver success. And we've deliberately brought here today some of the digital applications industry, the telco industries, users, public service policy makers, politicians. It's that collaboration between all those users can guarantee our economic success. I believe at the same time as that collaborative approach, the competition is also a very useful mechanism for us getting a better network, cheaper, faster, more flexible. We're already seeing that. I mean, the last year since I came into office, the numbers get from roughly less than 500,000 to over 1 million. That's a rapid change, rapid improvement and progress. So there's a strange combination I see it of collaboration and competition is, I think, can deliver us the network we need. Which goes back to my first question, what do we need? What are the characteristics of the broadband we want? I think, first of all, I was taken in Japan in their policy assessment that ubiquity was important. What does that mean? It means we have to cover the whole country. It means we leave no one behind. It means that you can get, I believe, easy access to the network from a whole range of different devices. And on that device, or those different devices, you can use a whole range of different applications. It means that it should be easy for me to get to my workplace from home, or from the bus, or even from the bike. It means that we need these new devices so that the block we have at the moment in terms of how many computers we have in our home, only 70% of houses have a computer. We're already hitting the limits if we're just measuring broadband in terms of how many houses have got it. We need to change the nature of the connectivity so that ubiquity actually means it's more widely and fully available. I think that goes back to the collaborative issue, that we need networks that are more open access networks across a range of different platforms. It's difficult because of our demographics for us to outdo Korea in terms of running fibre into apartments. But maybe we as a country with a very good competitive environment, as I see it, between mobile, cable, satellite, fixed line and other providers, maybe we can be best if it's a flexible combination of use of those that makes it easier for Irish people to use the networks here. We'll need speeds. Speeds are important, crucially important. I've always said that what we need to do is make sure that the speed availability is ahead of the demand. And that demand is lumpy. It can jump up if an iPlayer takes off. But I think that should be our aim. But the speed, as I said, that relates then to the other thing. How do you get the investment system in place to allow to provide those speeds? I believe it comes from a series of digital applications, one small application on top of another, making the business case. Those are the questions around, I think, the nature. What sort of speeds? What sort of access? What sort of ubiquity? What sort of technologies do we think are going to be vital? That, I think, is our first subject for discussion at the roundtables that we have in front of us. The outcome today, I'm looking forward to, be it the polling, be it the video recording of it, but more than anything else, it's hearing back from the facilitators at the tables, and hopefully just people themselves getting ideas, getting informed. Most of the people in this room have an interest in this area. If we all go away with a better understanding of where our competitive advantage lies, where our future economic development lies, then that, I think, will be a huge benefit to us as a country. I think we should start with the first question as to what broadband we need and work out the details down below from there. Thank you.
Solutions that the big corporates can have.
Thirdly, a major focus of the discussion here was around the word scalable and what scalability meant. That was viewed in a number of different layers. First of all, I think most of all here accepted or discussed anyway the need for a difference in level of services between rural and urban areas.
Speed versus quality, your speed maybe not the issue for certain applications, but actually quality was.
The question is whether we have the regulatory and policy framework that will enable the technologies, the applications, the platforms to talk to each other.
First of all, we felt that there was no distinction between rural needs and applications and urban needs and applications, and that this was so not just in terms of inclusion and equity, but also in terms of the environmental and the spatial policy benefits that availability would bring. We got into a bit of a debate then about bandwidth and how it should be valued.
The need to have a basic standard across the country in more practicality that a rural business in particular might need 5 or 6 megabytes.
Is the provider going to be a utility or commercial? If you're going to do it on a commercial basis, obviously you're going to leave out some areas.
We talked about very large corporates and their need for SLAs. We talked about small and medium-sized enterprises, and we talked about the home user.
The killer app we had was just ubiquitous broadband. That broadband will drive its own demands once you get it.
We felt that capacity begs a big question: what will people do with it? The provision of carrier neutral ducting was absolutely essential in the short term.
Are we looking at the end devices, all the hand devices? Are they included because they're a major player now?
We're striving towards a knowledge-based economy, but that needs joined-up thinking across all government departments, particularly through education, through finance, and through the Department of Enterprise and Employment. And one interesting aspect still today is that it is cheaper to buy capacity from Dublin to the likes of Lisbon or Milan than it is to buy from Dublin to Cork.
There's this category of people called digital nomads. They're working on the move, they're not just stuck in one place. Education is changing. We have to have broadband to give kids a chance. This is just the basic sine qua non. It's like the World Book of the 21st century. You just have to have it.
That for all applications, fibre is key. And getting more fibre into the ground in the right places is going to be really important. But also that wireless mobile type solutions beyond that will become even more important, and interoperability of the networks.
It should be treated like water and electricity as an essential service. And if you treated it like that, then you would set about designing an infrastructure. It's not enough, therefore, to just leave that to the market. So it needs positive state intervention, if you like.
What to talk about in this next session really is around whether or not there should be direct financial support by the government into building a network, or whether it should be left to market forces. Early mover status can be a good thing. It can send a strong statement of intent out internationally that the government is serious about broadband and is serious about Ireland being to the forefront.
The view being that the government should intervene directly in providing open access, particularly the open access ducting area, and be a wholesale provider across the state, facilitator of that.
As part of the next generation of ESB networks, a large part of that electricity network is going to have to be redone. That could be an opportunity to roll out a whole new fibre network on the back of that.
In terms of concerns with the approach, is to ensure that we continue to have kind of light, technology neutral regulation. The major concern is that this whole thing may not happen, because if the commercial incentives are not there for the rollout of NGB, that it may just completely stall.
The telecoms on our table feel that they're making the investments, but they may be bypassed seriously in the revenue streams down the line.
The feeling is very strongly that it's not in the short-term interest of any commercial entity to make some of the investment decisions that are required for this to go forward.
And maybe look at services as a way of also driving this rather than just the infrastructure.
A specific mention of international connectivity, particularly into Europe, will be important.
The wishes and the desires of rural communities to be part of the digital revolution and having access to broadband networks, and yet the very considerable planning difficulties that arise in rural areas.
Backhaul has come up as a huge issue, so it may be that, targeted intervention should be at the backhaul level rather than purely at the access level.
There's a degree of uncertainty around the boundaries that government will observe in, where are we going to start to intervene at the beginning of the process. And as long as that uncertainty exists, that's an impediment to investment.
If you can provide a 3 to 5 year horizon through a stable regulatory environment, then you can attract, for example, long-term pension funds to come and invest, which makes it more attractive. Otherwise, we're going to be caught in a short-term solution at just one point.
Somebody suggested that we are actually capable of putting together a crack team to deal with a lot of these issues, and in fact, when it comes to intervention, that's what was needed.
And finally, in terms of leadership or in terms of roles, there's a role for government to look at the role of regulators and actually converging regulators possibly in the future.
Free movement of those goods on the market and putting into service of the product. And that actually is a keystone element of the regulatory framework in Europe, and it deals with a lot of these.
The analogy was given with Holland. Traditionally Holland was a trading nation. It had big ports and it was centrally located. And we could make ourselves digital traders. Another immediate concern was sustainable energy. We can tie in sustainable energy with broadband. Somebody gave the analogy of the railways and harbours in the 19th century. It was to divert home rule, I think it was the way it was put, that you built a lot of them, but you built them all small, that they weren't viable on their own. And so we need to do it big enough that it's going to be viable.
How to capitalise on the presence in Ireland of global giants of the internet who are probably producing, at the moment, 80% of the content. If we looked at RTE's upgrade of their television network as they go digital, are there opportunities there? And the government is the biggest single user here. And if we were to look at that very fact, there are surely opportunities. A final suggestion was a digital literacy programme which would address the digital divide in the form of the educational gap between the haves and have-nots.
In relation to the broader question about the regulatory framework and, I suppose, how it evolves, how it changes, there was, I think, a good degree of agreement around the fact that it needs to be, by essence, evolutionary. Recognising the reality of the interplay between risk and reward in the commercial sector, and particularly and timely in the current context, the increasing scarcity there is likely to be of capital out into the future. Bearing in mind, I suppose, one side of the house that says, yes, we should have very prescriptive, very tight rules in relation to how buildings are accessed and standards for providing things in structures so that new networks can be easily rolled out. And maybe a slightly broader view that took the side that maybe it's effectively about setting broader guidelines in relation to access and letting service providers get on with it using their own particular skills and abilities.
As you move fibre further down the network, regulation of infrastructure may become a more difficult and a more central issue because the costs of building a fibre network are in the bill, essentially, and in the ducts and so forth. So access to ducts and so on, and the whole question of do you have equal access between different types of networks was discussed, but I think not resolved. And there was certainly a strong view from some people that backhaul was a facility that was of particular importance in and problematic supply in terms of rural access. On the other hand, there was a contrary view that actually there isn't an apparent market failure in backhaul, so why would we want to intervene in it?
Thanks, indeed, and apologies, I will have to slip off. There's a bill going through the Dáil today which on the banking side, which needs to go through. Some of the comments I was saying earlier on, and this is our central job, one of the jobs in government at the moment is giving people confidence. Giving people our economy is still sound. Our IT businesses are particularly sound. We have real potential. If that sense of confidence in direction is commonly held, then it's easier to achieve. There's I think it's fairly common acceptance in the room that broadband is a crucial part of our economic development. Looking at how do we turn that into reality is more complex and more subtle than sometimes is at first understanding, that there are subtleties around it. There was certainly an interesting one on open access. What were we talking about, the core network or the access network? I think that was an interesting comment in our own group, and that's one that I'd take out of it. The need to be clearer in terms of some of the words we use. One of the most refreshing things I got was to hear a young man, I can't see him there, but as a user, just coming up with a straight down the middle, I have this type of access and I want it different. A pure consumer-led, I don't like the way it's working at the moment, can you please do it differently? We need to hear that. We need to put ourselves, in my mind, policymakers, companies, in the consumer's shoes. And if we work back from there, I think we'll probably succeed. One of the thoughts I have is no harm maybe having a row. Or two, I'm talking about collaboration, but I think just in some of the afternoon sessions, my sense was some of them we need to get down to slightly more tougher calls around, what you're talking about open access in terms of that has difficulties attached to it, or around use of state investments is tricky. I think we were only scratching the surface here today on some of those issues that we have to actually tease out, and they're not going to be easy, some of them. Someone asked me earlier on, so what's next? So that was a good question. And I was said, first of all, and this may seem God yet more analysis, but we as a department are going to be engaged. We were commissioned by the Taoiseach with the task of developing a strategy around knowledge society. And Barry McSweeney's here, and Peter will be working in terms of how we evolve that. And I do think that what I want to do is take some of the sort of means of this sort of collaborative approach in terms of policy making into that strategy setting. And I think it'll actually be probably slightly further advanced in terms of it'll come in at the very start. So that from ground up we're kind of maybe more open to ideas, and I think that'll be concentrating, looking at some of these networks, like what's the implications in enterprise, in education, in environment and energy areas. That's one thing that's next. The other thing that's next, I think, is obviously in government delivery. I mean, there are key tasks that we have, taking on some of what we've heard today and continuing with the odd row or two in terms of how we do use our state assets. I get a strong sense coming from the room of the various overhearing different things that yes, that is pretty central. It's an important task for us to undertake. Then MBS is a crucial task to us to accomplish and to deliver, because it does provide a lot of that universal access that we're looking for. The schools programme is a real issue that we have to take on. I'd like to throw off to a government department. I think Jim Duffy has a huge aspect and task in terms, because as well as the Taoiseach giving our department the role in the knowledge society, he gave to finance the role, a lot of the role in e-government. And I think there's real role for the state in terms of delivery of our services. I'd have to say that I got one other thought in terms of that second question. I thought the two broader ones this afternoon worked, in my mind, worked quite well and was useful. The second one, it actually helped frame further definition down of what that question is it the market or is it government? Because you could just have that as a narrow reflection in terms of market bills or spends or the government bills and spends. There's that aspect, but there's a key sense that the government's role is twofold. The public role is, yes, in the kind of certain investment decisions, but it's also in the regulatory decisions. And my sense is that they're out of some of the work we're doing here, out of our policy papers. It is a key task for the regulator to take some of the sense of direction and then to deliver it into action. And I just mentioned that in terms of, in the what next category, I'm throwing it over to the regulator as the deliverer of policy ideals into action. My mind is full of different thoughts coming out of it, but I certainly feel that process of trying to agree common ambition and kind of getting a sense of how it turns into reality, it has been a very useful exercise. And I hope in each of your tables there's some sort of similar enlightenment. One idea a day is not a bad thing. If everyone got one idea a day here today, then we will have done well. The key aspect, as I said now, is to go on to what next, is to continue to deliver. I know that there's a Comrade conference tomorrow, which I think is part of an ongoing dialogue in this country. The European Commissioner is coming to that. That's fortuitous in the sense we're going into that event, coming out of this sort of event. This event is an opportunity just to come up for air from out of our own individual areas and just to hear different people's perspectives. And I hope on that purpose alone it has been useful, and very much thank you, Sandy, Bill, Sean, for organising it, or helping us organise it, and I hope everyone else got something out of the day. Thank you.